Hey everybody, so I've got some rules for my class that I kind of like to go over in this PowerPoint. So first is nested functions. So similarly to conditionals and loops, we can have nested functions, but we're not going to do that in this class. So if we take a look at the screenshot here with a giant X on it, we have a outer func on line 1, and then on line 3 we have an inner func. So that when we call line 7, we get both outer and inner print to the output. So we're not going to do this though. Break out your functions to have completely separate bodies of work. So I don't want to see this. Going forward, all of our code is going to start from a main function. So we're not going to have any more global logic, and we're not going to have any more global variables. And there's an exception to the global variables, and that's going to be for constants, so values that should not change during your program execution. So if you have something like pi equals 3.14, that's fine, right? Because pi doesn't change. If you have a tuple with some information in it, that's fine because tuples don't change. But I don't want to see things like the left side screenshot here where I have an empty list on line 1 and then I update that list on line 4. That's not going to fly. I also don't want to see something like that middle screenshot with the X on it. So I've got a file open on line 1 and then reading in the contents in on line 2 and then passing in that contents to the main function. So your main should always be blank. It should not have any parameters passed into it. And on the right side here is a proper kind of what I'm looking for, which is def main, whatever logic may go there is maybe a print statement, and then call main on line 5. So no global variables, there's nothing above that line on line 1 there. So that's kind of how I would expect you to start your programs going forward. And then feel free to break out more functions as the logic increases. I would encourage you to do so. The reason why we have this main function rule is to not allow you to willy-nilly just declare global variables or global logic all over the place. It forces you to encapsulate your logic and variables and pass them around appropriately. So kind of using that main function rule, we have an updated version of the salary program from the previous video. So here, determine bonus, determine benefits. The kind of big change here is lines 17 through 24. So everything got moved into the main function's scope, and then we call main on line 24. And then when it comes to repeating a program, so some of your assignments might say, ask the user if they'd like to go again. This does not mean calling main again. So if you call main again anywhere from besides the beginning of the program, you're going to end up doing something called recursion. And we don't want to do that based on user input. Because in theory, a user could make your program recurse X levels deep on the call stack, and it would actually cause your program to blow up and die. So we want to avoid that. We'll talk about recursion later in the course, but for now, don't call main from anywhere but the beginning of the program. Instead, you can use something like a while loop in your main to determine if the program should run again. So here's just an example. So def main while true, so this is an infinite loop, meaning you have to have some kind of break logic somewhere. So while true, do some logic, whatever that may be, and then ask the user, do you want to go again? So 1 for yes, and the other key for no, and then based on that user input, if they do not enter a 1, go ahead and break out. So that's how the program would just naturally end. If the user does enter a 1, they want to go again, and thus the whole while loop repeats. So these are just some rules for my class. Let me know if you have any questions.